Have you ever felt that deep ache in your chest, that yearning for something so simple, so pure, that it feels like a part of your very soul? Or maybe that cold dread that creeps in when you feel something precious being unjustly taken away. Perhaps, just perhaps, you've even felt that quiet suspicion, that nagging feeling that things aren't as they seem. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below, let us know our global family is here. And hey, before we get into this truly unbelievable story, would you mind hitting that like button? It really helps us out, and trust me, this one is especially for you. It's about those moments when you feel utterly powerless, and then something unexpected happens. Today, we're diving into a situation that'll make your jaw drop. It's about a man, a piece of land he poured his heart and soul into, and an organization that decided to draw a line, quite literally, right through his dreams. You won't believe what happened next. Let's dive in to see how one man's resilience bloomed in the face of utter frustration. Silas lived a quiet life in the small community of Oakhaven. His days were marked by the gentle rhythm of the seasons, the warmth of the sun on his skin as he tended to his crops, and the satisfaction of watching life spring from the soil. His small plot of land wasn't just a garden, it was his sanctuary, a place where he felt connected to something bigger than himself. He grew everything from plump tomatoes to sweet corn, vibrant bell peppers, and fragrant herbs. It wasn't about making a fortune, it was about the simple joy of nurturing life and sharing its bounty with his neighbors. Then came the Oakhaven Homeowners Association, or HOA as everyone called it. A new set of rules swept through the community like an unwelcome wind. Most were minor, things about lawn maintenance and paint colors. But one rule in particular struck Silas like a physical blow. The HOA declared that all undeveloped land within the community would be fenced off for aesthetic purposes and common use. Silas's heart sank. His garden, his pride and joy, was on a small, separate parcel of land he owned, adjacent to his house but technically considered undeveloped, according to the HOA's rigid definition. He tried to reason with Mrs. Albright, the head of the HOA, a woman known for her unyielding adherence to rules. "Mrs. Albright," Silas began, his voice thick with emotion, "this isn't just empty land to me. I grow food here. It feeds my family and my neighbors. It's a part of me." Mrs. Albright, a stern woman with tightly pursed lips, didn't even glance at the vibrant rows of vegetables. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth, "the rules are clear. All undeveloped land will be fenced. It's for the betterment of the community." But my crops?" Silas pleaded, gesturing to the burgeoning plants. "They'll be trapped inside. I won't be able to tend to them properly. They'll wither and die." The thought alone was a sharp pain in his chest. "That is regrettable, Mr. Thorne," Mrs. Albright stated flatly. "Perhaps you should have considered that before planting on land designated as undeveloped." Silas felt a surge of disbelief and anger. This wasn't some wild patch of weeds. This was his livelihood, his passion. He tried to explain the years of work he had poured into the soil, the careful cultivation, the love he felt for his plants. But Mrs. Albright remained unmoved, her eyes as cold as the winter frost. True to their word, the HOA soon erected a tall, chain-link fence around Silas's precious garden. A single gate stood as the only entry point, secured with a heavy-duty lock. Silas requested a key, but his request was denied. "It's common land now, Mr. Thorne," Mrs. Albright had said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Access will be managed by the HOA." Days turned into weeks, and Silas watched, helpless, as his crops suffered. The vibrant greens turned to dull yellows, the once promising buds withered, and the fruits he had so carefully nurtured began to rot. A deep sadness settled over him, a feeling of injustice that gnawed at his insides. It felt like a part of him was dying along with his plants. Sleep became a luxury. Silas would often find himself staring out the window at his fenced-off garden, a knot of frustration and despair tightening in his stomach. He felt powerless, his simple joy stolen by a bureaucratic decree. He talked to his wife, Beatrice, a kind and supportive woman who shared his love for the land. "It's not just the vegetables, Bea," Silas said one evening, his voice heavy with emotion. "It's the principle of it. They can't just take away what I've worked so hard for." Beatrice held his hand. "I know, Silas. It's not right." They explored every avenue. They attended HOA meetings, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The other members, mostly concerned with property values and manicured lawns, saw Silas's garden as an eyesore, a deviation from their perfectly planned community. Legal options seemed daunting and expensive. Silas felt trapped, his spirit slowly wilting like his neglected crops. One evening, as Silas sat on his porch, staring at the locked gate, a thought sparked in his mind. It was a long shot, a wild idea born out of desperation. He remembered the old property records he had tucked away in the attic. He had purchased his house and the adjacent plot of land years ago, long before the HOA had even been established. He vaguely recalled something about the deed. The next morning, Silas climbed into the dusty attic and rummaged through boxes filled with old documents. Hours later, his heart leaped. There it was, the original deed to his property. And there, clearly marked, was the separate parcel of land where his garden grew. It was indeed his property, legally and unequivocally. But then, a new wave of confusion washed over him. Why had the HOA fenced his land? Why had they treated it as common property? A seed of suspicion began to grow in his mind. Was it just a mistake? Or was something else going on? Silas decided to do some digging. He started talking to longtime residents of Oakhaven, people who had been there before the HOA's iron grip took hold. He listened to their stories, their frustrations with the increasingly stringent rules. And then, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Old Mr. Abernathy, who had lived in Oakhaven for over 50 years, recalled a conversation years ago, around the time the HOA was being formed. He remembered Mrs. Albright, even then a stickler for rules, expressing a keen interest in acquiring a certain undeveloped piece of land that bordered the community's common area. A piece of land that sounded suspiciously like Silas's garden plot. A dark suspicion began to solidify in Silas's mind. Could it be that Mrs. Albright hadn't made a mistake? Could it be that she had deliberately targeted his land, intending to absorb it into the HOA's control? The thought was infuriating, but it also ignited a spark of determination within him. He wouldn't let this injustice stand. Silas consulted a lawyer, Ms. Evelyn Reed, a sharp and no-nonsense attorney who listened intently to his story and examined his documents. Her eyes narrowed as she reviewed the property deed. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice firm, "this land is legally yours. The HOA had no right to fence it off." "But why, Ms. Reed?" Silas asked, his voice laced with frustration. "Why would they do this?" "We can only speculate at this point," Ms. Reed replied, "but it seems they may have overstepped their authority, perhaps intentionally." Armed with legal backing and a growing sense of righteous anger, Silas decided on a course of action. He sent a formal letter to the HOA, demanding the immediate removal of the fence and unrestricted access to his property. Mrs. Albright's response was swift and dismissive, reiterating the HOA's position and questioning the validity of Silas's claims. But Silas had a secret weapon, a trump card he had yet to play. While researching his property records, he had discovered something else, a small, almost insignificant detail in the original plat map of the Oakhaven development. A narrow, forgotten strip of land that connected his garden plot directly to the main road. A strip of land that was also legally part of his property and, crucially, outside the HOA's jurisdiction. And on this strip of land stood the only gate providing access to the fenced-off area. A plan began to form in Silas's mind, a daring and audacious plan born out of desperation and a fierce desire to reclaim what was rightfully his. He contacted a local real estate agent, Mr. Henderson, a quiet and unassuming man who was known for his discretion. Silas explained his situation, carefully omitting the details of his plan. He simply told Mr. Henderson that he wished to purchase a small piece of land adjacent to his property. Mr. Henderson, intrigued by Silas's unusual request, found a small, overlooked parcel of land that bordered the narrow strip Silas owned, the very land where the gate to his garden was located. It was a small, seemingly insignificant piece of land that no one had ever bothered to buy. Silas pooled his savings, every penny he had, and made an offer on the property. To his surprise, it was accepted quickly. The previous owner, an elderly woman who had moved away years ago, was simply happy to be rid of it. The closing was swift and uneventful. Silas now owned the small strip of land that contained the only gate to his fenced-off garden. He was the sole owner, and more importantly, he held the key, quite literally, to accessing his crops. The next morning, Silas arrived at his garden with a pair of bolt cutters and a triumphant glint in his eyes. He approached the locked gate, the symbol of his frustration and helplessness. With a satisfying snip, the lock fell to the ground. He pushed the gate open and stepped onto his land, the familiar scent of the earth filling his lungs. But Silas wasn't just there to reclaim his garden. He had a plan. He erected a small for sale sign on his newly acquired strip of land, right next to the gate. The sign was simple, with Mr. Henderson's contact information. It wasn't long before Mrs. Albright, her face a mask of fury, arrived at the scene. She pointed a trembling finger at Silas. "Mr. Thorne, what is the meaning of this? You have no right to remove that lock." Silas smiled calmly. "Actually, Mrs. Albright, I do. This is my property." He gestured to the for sale sign. "And this gate, well, it's on my property too. As the sole owner of this land, I can do as I please with it." Mrs. Albright's face paled. She looked from Silas to the for sale sign, realization dawning in her eyes. She understood. Silas now controlled access to the fenced-off area. A tense standoff ensued. Mrs. Albright and several other HOA members argued, pleaded, and even threatened Silas. But he stood his ground, his voice firm and unwavering. He had the law on his side, and more importantly, he had the key. Days turned into weeks. The HOA tried every tactic they could think of to regain control of the gate, but Silas refused to budge. He even started cultivating the small strip of land he now owned, planting a vibrant row of sunflowers that cheerfully faced the locked fence. The situation became a local spectacle. Some neighbors sided with Silas, admiring his ingenuity and his refusal to be bullied. Others, loyal to the HOA, whispered about his defiance. But Silas didn't care. He was tending to his garden again, the joy of nurturing life returning to his days. Eventually, the HOA realized they were defeated. They approached Silas with a proposal. They offered to buy the small strip of land he owned, offering him a significant sum of money. Silas considered their offer carefully. He wasn't motivated by greed, but he saw an opportunity to ensure the long-term security of his garden. He agreed to sell the land, but with one condition. The fence around his original garden plot had to be removed entirely, and the HOA had to formally acknowledge his ownership of the land. After much deliberation, the HOA reluctantly agreed. The fence came down. Silas's garden was once again open to the sun and the rain, a testament to his resilience and his unwavering connection to the land. He continued to grow his vegetables, sharing his bounty with the community, his spirit unbroken. And Mrs. Albright? Well, she remained the head of the HOA, but her authority had been subtly diminished. People remembered the story of Silas and the fence, a reminder that even the most rigid rules could be overcome with determination and a little bit of ingenuity. What do you think of Silas's clever solution? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to fight for something you believed in? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others. It reminds us that even when we feel fenced in by life's challenges, there's always a way to find the key. The moral of the story, my friends, is this: never underestimate the power of perseverance and the importance of knowing your rights. Even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, a little bit of creativity and a lot of determination can help you reclaim what is rightfully yours. And sometimes the smallest key can unlock the biggest doors.